Welcome to Time Warner Cable's local edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We are joined today by Professor Tomas Summers Sandoval. He is the History Department Chair of Pomona College. When I come back in my next life, I want to be you because I love history and I love your area of expertise. You're focused on Latinos during the Vietnam War. And when I think about that era, I'm old enough, I see a lot of iconography with Europeans, with African Americans, I say Anglos, but I don't see a lot of Latinos being depicted. Am I right?
I think it's very true, yeah. In some ways, the Latinos have been left out of the story of Vietnam in a big way, and yet for Latino communities, especially in places like California, it was a very big part of our community story.
Were there significant numbers of Latinos serving in Vietnam? Because this is the 60s and 70s.
That's
and,
right.
There were a good number of Latinos in our midst, but not as much as today, obviously.
Yeah, and it's a difficult question to even answer. At the time of the Vietnam War, the U.S. military wasn't counting Latinos or Hispanics separately from other soldiers, so they're folded into the white population. So one of the benefits of doing research on this topic right now in the 21st century is that we have computers to be able to analyze these big data sets and look at the census records and other federal surveys that let us identify just how many Latino male Vietnam veterans are there as a population.
So what are you finding? What's the data telling you?
Yeah, well, we're still running numbers, but initial numbers are showing that Latinos are either evenly represented or overly represented, depending on the state in question. So in a place like California, just a touch overrepresented. In places like Arizona, Colorado in particular, profoundly overrepresented than their share of the population.
Why? I mean, it was a draft, so presumably it shouldn't be that way. So what was happening?
There are two stories of the draft of
yes,
Vietnam. There's the draft before the lottery system and the one after. And the lottery system is a more random and fairer way of doing it. And before that, there was still a lot of discrimination and bias involved in the draft system.
But meaning shenanigans?
In part, local draft boards had a lot of control over who was going to go and who wasn't.
So an Anglo may walk in and say he has a flat foot, and yes, you have a flat foot.
And the biggest form of sort of that results in discrimination when it comes to the draft is just your economic class. There are deferments for people with education. It's much easier to get a deferment when you have a personal doctor, when you have a family or access to lawyers who are able to navigate the system for you. So disproportionately, the poorer you are and the least educated your population is, the more likely they were to end up in Vietnam.
What's phenomenal about your research is you're engaging in an oral history project.
Primarily,
what are some of the highlights? I mean, we have a few minutes, but what are some of the highlights?
Oh, I mean, I think one of the amazing things about it is that these stories are not just ways of understanding the Vietnam War differently, better, the tragedy of it, the long-lasting impacts of war on individuals, on families, on communities. But it also becomes this window into every other important thing of the 20th century. I mean, when you understand the way that the draft worked and the way that some populations in U.S. society were more susceptible to the draft than others, well, then the story of Vietnam for individual soldiers is also a story about Latinos and education, Latinos and economic class and opportunity.
Did you hear of tensions within units between Latinos and Anglos, Latinos and African Americans, or was it fairly harmonious?
I can't say that it was fairly harmonious.
Okay, fair.
But most of the stories talking about race tension that I've collected, at least, and that I'm familiar with, have been much more the kinds of fights that break out when African Americans from the South are in the same units with Anglo-Americans from the South, and sort of the transplanting of those racist battles from other places.
Is there a book on the horizon?
There is.
Because I want to read it. When's it going to come out? Do you know yet?
I don't. Next year I'm on sabbatical, and the
You'll
goal
come back
next
and tell
year
us.
is to finish it up.
He is Tomas Summers Sandoval, a professor at Pomona College. I'm Brad Pomerance. It's Time Warner Cable's local edition.